I'm Patrick, Gavin, POLITICO. It is now time to turn the table with the Sunday show host, as we do every Friday. This week's topics, Ukraine and the politics of the U.S. budget. Joining us to talk about that and more, Bloomberg News' Al Hunt and CBS News' Margaret Brennan. Margaret, let me get your take on sort of what's happening with Ukraine and also the president's response. He has obviously said that there would be consequences, but we're not quite sure what those consequences would be. Do you have a good sense of exactly what the White House is thinking if, in fact, the violence does continue?
Well, the U.S. is looking at condemnations and statements. The real pressure they're exerting is diplomatically behind the scenes, trying to build this Western alliance with the EU to get the protests to stop and try to help usher in a peaceful transition within Ukraine, because you do have this peace deal signed today, but the question is, does it stick? Can it hold until elections are held in the next few months? And is there enough support for it? Because this country appears to be ready to ignite. What's interesting is take a step back, and foreign policy right now seems to be viewed through the prism of where Russia falls. You see this push-pull as Putin appears to be trying to bring in some of these former Soviet states closer to Moscow through economic influence. The U.S. doesn't want that. There's not a specific strategic national interest goal when it comes to Ukraine, but the U.S. doesn't necessarily want to see Russia further emboldened, particularly when they're blocking the U.S. at the UN. They're not necessarily putting enough pressure on Syria yet to follow through in the chemical weapons deal. They're blocking action on a number of fronts.
Back here at home, change CPI is not in the president's proposed budget. Do we have any sense, and of course there is here in Washington, this blame game about why that isn't the case, coming both from the White House and Congress. What is your outlook on whether or not a compromise is actually possible for this to happen?
I think it's very unlikely. I think the White House position, the Democrats' position, has been good. We'll give an entitlements if you give in taxes. And what the Republicans basically have said is no deal. You could get a deal along the lines of Simpson-Bowles and Domenici-Rivlin from the White House, I believe. And it would be tough with congressional Democrats, but you could force them to come along. But Republicans have said absolutely no.
All right, Al, tell us about your program this weekend.
Well, the governors are in town, as you know, Patrick. Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire, who I think is a really interesting governor. New Hampshire is always interesting in a political sense, and it's a state, as you know, everybody who is in high office in that state's a woman. So we'll be talking to one of them.
All right, Margaret, tell us about what we can expect to see on Face the Nation this Sunday.
Well, we're going to see, can this peace deal hold in Ukraine? We're going to have a live report from Kiev. Holly Williams from CBS is on the ground there. I'll be joining Bob Schieffer as well to talk about the policy implications. And Bob will be looking at what's happening here at home. Two very influential governors, Republican Bobby Jindal of Louisiana and Maryland's nearby Democratic Governor Martin OMalley will be joining him. O'Malley's already said he's looking at a 2016 bid himself. So it'll be interesting to get his take on some of the big issues out there, healthcare, the field in 2016, and the politics of governing right now from his view.
That's it for this week. You can check out our full interviews online at politico.com/turnthetable. Have a great weekend.